Welcome back to the Altars and Ashes podcast, where we believe the Lord's kingdom still advances, the fire still burns, and God is rebuilding his people through households of faith. Buchanan Dominance Fleming.
I'm Austin Tucker.
And I'm Robbie Stringer.
And today we have a special guest with us, Victor Oquendo, owner of Iron Shield Heating and Air. He serves the Ocala, Florida regional area. Vic, what's up, man?
Yeah, what's going on? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Robbie's not happy that you're here.
He is. I'm like mediocre on it.
Yeah,
it's
neither
not unhappy.
Positive. It's not.
I did see the look he gave.
Yeah.
No, honestly, anyone that works with air conditioners in Florida is doing God's work.
Yes,
so
that's right. Said.
And even if you don't like them, you say that you like
And
them.
I can tell you where the look of the spice comes from. It's because you've joined us in this chimney of incense.
It's true. I now have 3 cigars smoke blowing my way instead of 2.
At least mine is coffee flavored. So it smells better.
I mean, honestly, it's like Austin said, it's incense to the Lord is what we're doing here. So you're not partaking in providing incense to the Lord. How do you feel about that?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
All right. So Vic is one of the most active churchmen we have, which is no coincidence because he works hard on the business side and he works hard in the church as well. So Vic, we're glad you're here specifically because today we're going to be talking about the importance of building and supporting Christian businesses, especially in the context of the church and in Christian boroughs.
It's getting hot in here, Beatty.
Yeah, I know, man. I'm sweating. I think I'm going to take my clothes off.
Please don't do that.
No.
What should I call Iron Shield Heating and Air?
That sounds like a great idea.
When the elements come for your home, you need protection from Iron Shield Heat and Air. Their licensed and insured technicians will have you feeling like royalty.
I'm victorious!
Whether you're a homeowner or run a commercial property, Iron Shield Heat and Air are equipped with the knowledge and skills to get the job done right. Maintenance, repairs, ductwork, new units. Iron Shield does it all, and they're ready to fight for your comfort 24/7. IronShieldHeatingandAir.com. Shield yourself from the elements. Iron Shield.
Beatty, get your clothes back on.
And now I can put my clothes back on. And before we go any further, I need to define our terms here because Robbie would force me to do so anyway. So I might as well describe what a Christian borough is. So working on a book right now called Strongholds of the Kingdom, and it is about building Christian boroughs. And so I define a Christian borough as a strategic, covenantal, institutionalized clusters of households, churches, and schools that are bound together by a shared confession of Christ and a commitment to build for generations yet unborn.
I think there's about 8 words you need to define in your definition.
Oh God. Okay. All right.
Honestly, though, it is one of the better definitions I've heard.
It's a more thorough, like I have tried to, minimize it, and I didn't feel like it had the structure that it needed. But basically I would say this, if I'm trying to define it, for Robbie here, I would say that it is a group of people who come together with the goal of creating a community that honors God first and ensures that the people within that community are able to operate and live a quiet and peaceful life, honoring the Lord without any unnecessary overreach, maybe. So I'm not talking about like a commune or an occult or anything like that. But
wait, so we're not starting a cult?
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vic, that's actually why you're here today.
Yeah.
We need you to help found this.
I see that now.
We need funding.
You've come in too early with that. We were going to save that for a little bit later. We're going to ask you
My
about
fault.
profit margins, and then
I will say the second breakdown of your explaining that makes a lot more sense to me as well. So,
well, then you're better off than Robbie is.
You got big words in that first breakdown.
And I actually think big words are important. They do have meaning. But when we're doing a podcast or teaching or preaching,
I'm only messing, by the way.
It's important that we make sure that our audience understands.
Yeah, you heard it. You heard it. Robbie just said he thinks he's more superior than all of our listeners.
You think
that's what I heard.
Idiots? Look at him, he's like, how do I think out of this?
No. Whenever I teach or preach, especially since I'm used to working with youth, one of the things I always want to make sure is there a chance that someone doesn't understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because we definitely want to make sure that we are understood.
Yeah, it's actually wisdom on your part. We're only giving you a hard time because that's what we do. But no, yeah. So, strategic means essentially that it has been thought through. You're covering all your bases. Covenantal, meaning you're making a promise to one another to care for each other, like we see in the book of Acts. Institutionalized means that you actually formalize it, right?
Mhm.
So you define, it's not just people trying to take care of each other, but like you form businesses, you form actual churches and community groups to make sure that you're meeting the governmental requirements that will help you keep this together for a long period of time. And then the main piece there is really the commitment to build for generations yet unborn. So we on this podcast are mostly post-mill. I think we're probably all there at this point. And we believe that the kingdom is going to advance, as we say in the opening. And so we want to be part of that advancement.
And by post-mill, at least in this, what's important for this context, let me set that word aside for a second.
Yeah, sure.
But here's what we mean. It's very common for people to think that things are going to keep getting worse and worse. There's going to be less and less Christians. There's going to be more and more victory for evil.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, bad. But at the same time, people who think that it's in some ways good because that means that Jesus is coming back soon. Mm-hmm. And so every time something bad happens, they say, oh, there's one of the signs of the times. But what we're saying is there's actually another way of looking at it. And that is that we're looking positively for the future, that Christ's kingdom is going to be built. And so therefore we're going to be busy doing things that build that kingdom and that look to the future. Yeah. And that we're going to build in a positive sense.
Well, and you said something last night on our drive in that there have been Christians throughout history who said, oh, it's the end times. I can tell. Things are forming together. It's the end times. Jesus is coming back soon. And then they die and Jesus hadn't come back. And then new people say the same thing.
This ideology, though, like Warren Wiersbe was famous for saying, why do you polish brass on a sinking ship?
Mm-hmm.
So the concept is, why would we build nice buildings if we're going to be raptured out of here and give them to the secularists?
If that's the outlook that you're going by, why build anything at all?
Exactly.
Just bunker,
And Jesus' command was to tarry until he came.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean changing the way we do things. If anything, it should drive us more to do things for the purpose of building for him, not knowing when he comes.
Yeah. Is it Jeremiah that says, build where you are and start
Yes. Marry, give your children in marriage, plant vineyards. Yeah.
And I think that even if you did have the mentality that things are negative and that Jesus could come at any time or whatever, we still need to be faithful today.
That's right.
Even if I thought that Jesus was coming tomorrow, it would still be my responsibility to do what God has called me to today. And that involved a number of different things, including working and taking care of my family and doing what I've been called to do.
Amen.
Good. I like it. All right. So let me finish sort of the structure of the borough, and then we'll get back to the main thesis. So, a borough does have clear lines of identity and formation and practice. That's what we talked about with the institutionalizing. It has elders. These are men who lead, protect, and shepherd the community with biblical clarity. And it has institutions, and those are schools, churches, businesses, all that embody Christ's lordship in their ordinary life. And so, the borough economy matters because belief without structure doesn't endure. So what I want to talk about is why supporting Christian businesses inside of a Christian community matters so much. And these are things like work and employment and trade and job creation. Those are not secondary issues. Those are things that we need to be thinking about because they are formative forces that either strengthen or they hollow out a community over time. And so we've said this before on the show, and we'll keep saying it. Economics is never neutral. And so someone is always going to pay, someone always profits, and someone always forms the instincts of a people. And that's what I was saying earlier, just off mic, we were talking about, work catechizing. it forms the instincts of a people. And so when Christians outsource their labor and their spending and their livelihoods to a system that despises their faith, they shouldn't be surprised when people's conviction erodes. And that's why, why we had the opportunity, we wanted to sit down with Vic and talk about, building, employing, and the trades. Robbie, you look like you had something you wanted to say. And
I just wanted to say, just kind of set a foundation for this, is that some people might look at what we're talking about and say, well, you're talking about like earthly things as opposed to spiritual things.
No.
And what I want to say is that one of the first commands that God gives to Adam and Eve in Genesis 2, it's verse 15, it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of the tree of the garden. But, I'll just stop there. What I really want to focus on is where it says that he took man, put him in the garden to what? To work it and keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And because of this, in chapter 3, after the fall, when God curses the ground for Adam and talks about how toil was going to be difficult. When I was growing up, I was under the impression that work was one of the curses on man.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that it was a punishment. And being a young,
what taught you that? What do you think? Like if you were to try to,
I mean, part of it was probably my own laziness. So I kind of thought of work as kind of a negative thing.
Just because you didn't want to do it.
But then because I heard the story in Genesis 3 about the different curses, when you say, well, I don't like work, it seems like work was put as a curse on Adam. And so therefore, work is it's something you have to do to survive, but it's unfortunate that we have to do it, right?
Yeah.
But work is not first mentioned in that curse.
Yeah.
Work is first mentioned here in chapter 2 before the fall.
In the design order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so God has made us to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so work and how that work functions in a society, that would be economics, is all part of God's command for us on this earth.
Amen. Yeah.
And so I wanted to set that before we start talking about Christians building businesses. I wanted to emphasize the fact that, being a pastor is a calling or a missionary, but we're all called to do something.
And all of those are holy callings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
our calling is every man has a responsibility before God to find their calling.
Yeah.
And so this secular versus sacred divide that a lot of people think is Christianity is a heresy called asceticism that finds its foundation in the New Testament. In fact, Paul was dealing with it with the Colossians. He said this, if with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, as if while you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teaching. These indeed have the appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. So there are Christians who literally will teach, if I'm going to live for God, I shouldn't be driven to build a successful multi-million-dollar empire. Or I wouldn't want to be rich because that would mean, it's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than it is for a camel to enter through an eye of a needle. And they take all these verses out of context. And what it is, it's a version of Christian asceticism. They think by being poor and by not doing these things, that makes them more spiritual. Mm-hmm. And I think we should say that out front, that God needs and uses throughout all of history businessmen.
Yeah.
The book of Luke, when Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke, the very first chapter, it's dedicated to a wealthy man. And he thanks him, knowing that by giving this wealthy man his gospel, he would be able to get it hand copied and distributed to the churches. God has always used businessmen and men of means.
So what do you think then, and this will jump us into our first segment, what does the church usually get wrong about business?
That it's a secular thing.
Okay.
And I wanted to clarify something you said a second ago, Austin. You mentioned that asceticism, I think you used the phrase foundations in the New Testament. What you mean is foundation of speaking against it in the New Testament.
Yes.
That's what those verses use.
Asceticism goes all the way back to pre.
And just to clarify, asceticism is, just as a loose definition, would be believing that not enjoying things of like physical things of this world makes you more spiritual.
We see that a lot, I think, still today.
So some early Christians that were really affected by this, they would intentionally go live out in caves. They would only eat just enough to be able to survive.
Well, you have the ascetic Christians who would literally live on top of a pole.
Right.
To show how spiritual they were. So they would build these poles, and these great quote unquote men of God would stay on top of that pole for 30 days, 40, 50 days on end to show that, they're punishing the flesh, and they were putting it up for everybody to see how spiritual they were. They literally lived on top of poles.
So they were planking.
Yes, before planking was cool.
was cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you might want to pull your mic down one because your beard keeps going to. What were you saying?
I guess to show that they don't really need materialistic things. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. It's just, if I do not handle, I do not teach, I do not touch, I will be more pleasing to God. When in fact, mature Christianity is able to touch, taste, and enjoy to the glory of God.
Absolutely. Amen. Yeah. All right. So the first segment is economics is never neutral. And the guys were giving me a hard time because I said catechize like 4 times in this. But I said, basically that economics is a formative force. And what I'm saying there is that economics disciples or catechizes. And what I mean by that is we learn something by what we get paid for, right? And so if we get paid by something, we're going to prioritize those things. And because we are prioritizing those things, they matter to us. And so really what I'm saying here is that, sometimes our schedules catechize our family and teach them what is important. And it might be because of economic incentives. Mm-hmm. For instance, overtime, let's say that overtime, you get extra pay. And so if you're always trying to get the overtime, nothing wrong with that. It's not, I'm not, saying it's bad or anything like that. But if you prioritize that, let's say over going to church, what you're teaching your kids is that money is more important than honoring God through the worship. And so not to say there are plenty of people who have to work on Sundays. I don't mean that you can't work on Sundays or something like that. But what I am saying is the things that you incentivize are the things that matter the most to you. I know I'm in a secular job, and what the company incentivizes is what is sold, right? Yeah. And they know that. You know that as a business owner, right? If you want to incentivize you, if you want to sell more of something, what do?
Yeah, you incentivize the guys to sell it.
To sell it, exactly. And so sometimes our paychecks actually speak louder than our words. Mm-hmm. And, I've got a couple different scriptures to anchor here. So Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon or money, depending on whichever one you're going through. Robbie, you want to read Proverbs 13:22?
Sure. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So I think especially for that passage, and that's a proverb, right? So that's advice. Mm-hmm. It says that if you're a good man, you leave an inheritance, and this is an inheritance that's last, right? Because you leave it to your children's children.
Like a legacy.
Exactly. And I don't take that to mean you refuse to leave anything to your children and you leave it to your grandchildren.
Yeah.
We're talking about something that is multi-generational.
Well, that is so important because I think that there is a growing, and I don't think it's actually Christian at all. I think it's actually secular that has maybe led into the Christian world, but people going, well, I want my kids to have to earn it. They need to work for everything that they get because I had to work for it. So I'm not going to leave them anything. Mm-hmm. And especially now with nobody being able to buy first-time homes and stuff like that, how much more important is it to be thinking generationally and about how you're setting your kids up to honor God and how their kids are going to honor God? And if you're thinking 5 generations from now, you got to help set them up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that the secular world has sort of catechized many Christians to think that it's better to make them start at ground zero. And that's not what the Bible says, though.
I do wonder if part of the motivation there, too, is if I don't leave it to my kids, I get to spend it all.
And it gets back to this unbiblical individualism of I'm a self-made man and I don't want to, I did it and I don't want to take that away from my kids. They need to earn it. And
there's nothing wrong with teaching them hard work. You should
they do need to earn.
Yeah.
But at the same time, throughout every generation until the industrial era that we're in now, until the industrial era,
epic.
That was everybody built family business.
Yeah.
That was the only way you'd make a living. In fact, when you got married, the Old Testament command was, so Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. He was using marriage language because what would happen is during the biblical times of Jesus, you would offer the bridal price, you would be engaged to her, and then you would go back to your father's property, build a house on that property, prepare a house because you were to have a place prepared before you brought your wife home and actually consummated that marriage. And then there was a command in the Bible that they were to take time in the honeymoon, knowing each other for a year, and do only that which was necessary on the property.
Yeah.
But that allowed them to have that relationship because it was a family economic system. And then eventually dad would die off. They would take the main house and the process would continue. Yeah.
Got one more verse here. I'm going to read 1 Timothy 6 through 10. It says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many things. So do you guys think that passage leads many people to go, okay, I would rather not have any attachment at all because I don't want to fall into love of money?
And then they fall into asceticism.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like a different ditch altogether.
Yes. There's two ditches on both sides.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because on the one side you have asceticism where things are bad.
Yep.
Then you have greed on the other side where things are everything.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, what this passage is looking at is talking about the love of money being the root of all kinds of evil. Now, in the King James Version that, was in use for so long, it says the love of money is the root of all evil. And many people quote that as money is the root of all evil. And this is why quoting things accurately becomes important because it's not money, it's the love of money that becomes the problem. When we become obsessed with it. And so passages like this are warning us against that attitude. But then what people do is they take a passage like that and says, well, I guess trying to make money is bad.
Well,
that's not what it's saying.
The scripture verse for theologically talking about from greed to a biblical balance. Ephesians 4, he's talking to those who have stolen. And it's funny, when we think of thief, sometimes we think of like stealing petty, but you have thieves that were also selling doves and where Jesus flipped the table, well-to-do thieves who are thieving legally. Okay. So Ephesians 4:28, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands. And then he gives a reason why, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. So here, Ephesians 4, he tells the greedy not to stop working and to stop stealing and just live a life of poverty. He tells them, do it honestly, but do it well enough that you have extra to give to people who need something.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So don't stop working. Learn not to take
greedily.
Instead, share.
Yes.
Don't just not work and gain.
Are you saying God's a communist?
No.
But
honestly, some of the negative things about, because I think about economics a lot. I teach economics on a 4-year rotation at our Christian school. And so I think about that a lot. And a lot of our arguments in our political culture, a lot of them do come down to different economics. And because there is the strain of socialism, of communism, of certain types of populism that are very anti-wealthy. And of course, to most people, the definition of wealthy is everybody who makes more money than I do. Yeah. I'm middle class. Not me. The amount of money I have is fine. But all those people who make more than me, they're the bad guys, right? And so some of them fit in. That's why it's important to have the balance that the scriptures actually give to to combat some of these ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, people who talk about socialism and communism usually can't define what those things are. So in other words, you read in the book of Acts where it talks about how people share.
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's communism. It's like, no, that's not what communism is. Sharing is not communism. Communism is a whole economic and has a whole deep theory I'm not going to go into now, even though I'd like to, but a whole thing that's very anti-Christian.
Yeah.
The founders of communism, if you ask them, they would say, yeah, we're anti-Christian.
Yeah, for sure.
We hate God. One thing I did want to mention, though, since before we get to the fullness of what we'll talk about the Christian Borough, we're kind of setting the stage here with having the right attitude towards work and money.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to that 1 Timothy passage that we read about the love of money being the root of all evil.
Yeah.
And just a little bit later in that same chapter, in 1 Timothy 6, this is in my mind because I'm talking about this in my Sunday school, adult Sunday school class this week, but just a few, in verse 17, we finished reading in verse 10 before. So
7 verses later.
Yeah, just 7 verses later. Good math.
Yeah.
It says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy.
Yeah.
They are to do good, to be rich in good works, and be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so they may take hold of that which is truly life. And so it then addresses people who are obsessed with getting rich, and it says, you need to be careful about that because the obsession with getting rich can create a lot of problems. It can become idolatrous. It can lead you to all types of evil. But then it says, now, but if you are rich, it doesn't say you can't be rich, but it says, don't be haughty. In other words, don't be prideful, because sometimes wealth can make you look down on other people who don't have as much as you. And it says, don't set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches. So know that ultimately it is not your riches that save you. There's certain things that happen that you can throw as much money at as you want, and it won't do anything. And so we have to set our hope ultimately on God, not upon our things. And then it says, for the wealthy to do good, to be willing to, and be especially willing to share, thus storing up eternal treasures rather than simply ones that are on this earth. Again, sharing is not communism.
Yeah.
It's not socialism. Those are economic structures and governmental structures. This is simply saying that if you are a person who has money, look to do good with your money.
Yeah.
What I always say is there's 2 questions you got to ask about if someone has money, with their wealth, there's 2 questions you got to ask. How did they get that money?
Did they get it honestly?
Exactly.
Right.
Did they get it honestly? Because there's nothing wrong with doing work, honest work, and being compensated.
Not only is there nothing wrong, it's good.
It's good.
It's good.
Yes.
Right.
It's good for society.
Right. So
The second question.
the second question is then what do you do with that money once you have it?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
And so if you can, and I don't think there's anything wrong with taking care of your family and enjoying that money.
Yeah.
But if all you're doing is spending that money on yourself, then you got problems. So I think if you have more than you need, there ought to be serious prayer for wisdom on how God would have you to use that money.
It's almost like we planned this because you really set me up here. Because I want to go now, before we get into the actual borough part of it and talk to Vic about, how he got where he is and everything. I want to talk about the parable of the talents. Okay. So in Matthew chapter 25, I'm going to read verses 14 through 30. So bear with me. It says, for it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them to his property. To one, he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He would have received the 5 talents, or he who would have received the 5 talents at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled the accounts with them. And he who had received them the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. And his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. enter into the joy of your master. And he who also had 2 talents came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And at my coming, I should have received what was mine own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given more, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not even, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. Bless you. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
There will be no blessings.
What's that?
You said blessings right in the middle of that. There's no blessings in there.
I said bless you, actually.
Oh.
So, in that passage, we see the parable is teaching that he who has should invest to have more. And so it also teaches against being slothful, right? And so really all I'm trying to lay out here is that whatever your talents are, whether that be, ministry or whether that be owning a business, we are to use our talents and our efforts to the glory of God and to grow what he has given us. And to not do that and to not care about that is slothful.
And talents was a form of money.
Right.
And I do believe that our use of the word talent
Derives from that.
derives from that.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that before we want to jump
So
into
the secret's not to hide it, but to just leave it flopping out there.
No, I think it's to grow it, to make it larger, actually, and to extend the length that the money goes towards people.
Absolutely.
So, segment 2, why job creation matters. Christian boroughs need employers, not just employees. And so, when Christians cannot employ their own people, what happens is we've got to go outside the church. And then, we're risking a couple different things, being taken advantage of. We're also not investing in the community, investing in the people who are investing in a church. And so, Vic, maybe take a few minutes and give us just sort of a framework about how you got into business and what your business does and how you try to operate with a biblical principle.
Yeah. So, my whole career is working has been in the HVAC industry. So I started out as a technician, and I say a technician as an installer running ductwork. So you do all the grunt work, you work your way up. And as I got into sales and management and stuff like that, that's when I knew that, I had a knack for, I guess, people in a sense, like one-on-one conversations and meetings and just a sense of direction. So that's when I knew I wanted to do, start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, like hiring folks,
Mm-hmm.
Of course that's a process where you can't necessarily sit them down and say, are you a Christian?
Right.
Tell me about it, because they make that illegal.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't do that. But what I will say is I do read them just to see if they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen it already time and time where they may not be, saved at the moment, a Christian at the moment, but they do transition into it just from
the conversation.
Just the conversation. Yeah, it's just planting the seeds and all that stuff. And so that's where I started as a technician, built my way up, working blood, sweat, and tears, and started my business. And now I'm dedicated to finding good folks who have a good head on their shoulder.
Do you ever have people who are referred to you through like church connections?
Yeah. I've had that a time or two. And
I'm assuming you've probably had positive and negative experiences.
I have. Yeah.
That way.
It goes both ways. I mean, I say 80% of my employees, I did not know them personally beforehand. And it might be even more than that, actually,
How many people do you employ around?
Right now,
Various endeavors.
Yeah, so there's 14 in the HVAC company.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
Vic, let me ask you, because I was listening to, when you're talking about how you got started, because I'm thinking about people who are maybe younger or trying to find where they're going. Because, I work with the youth at our church.
Yeah.
And I work with youth at the Christian school. And a lot of them, as they start getting older, they get to be juniors and seniors. People are asking them, so what are you going to do with your life?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just don't know the answer to that question when they're 18.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you, how old were you when you started working with that type of work?
Yeah, so I started early. And so for me, I started life.
It was climbing through HVAC.
It's just one of those things where I was young, and when I was younger, I did do some things that might have not have been the best things in life. So I had a kid at a young age. So I had no choice but to transition into the working class. So I think I was 17 when I started HVAC, and then I might have been, I don't know,
17. Did you lie about your age to get the job?
No, actually,
So that's another
and actually,
conundrum.
yeah. So to dig a little deeper into that, it was an apartment maintenance position.
Oh yeah.
So I started as a groundskeeper.
Yep.
And real quickly bought a tool bag, and then was taught how to change a toilet, change the blinds on the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we took on-call rotation. So I had to learn real fast how to fix an air conditioner
On your own.
on my own, because, the supervisor would show up to help, but, you're thrown to the wolves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like a lot of people think about going to college to get prepared for work.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you got
skipped
your
college.
training. You got your training there.
Yes,
in practical work.
Yes.
So they showed you how to do it, and so you got that training, like that on the job training.
Yeah.
Now,
and
wait
then,
a second. You could own a business and not go to college?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Nobody talks about that.
Oh yeah. Anybody who's listening, I mean, that's if you're wanting to get into a trade, the best thing, the best recommendation I have is just go knock on doors.
Mm-hmm.
If you go knock on doors, and then you walk in, you have a good head on your shoulder, and say, listen, I don't know anything. I know what a filter is. I don't know anything about air conditioning. Or if you're going for electrical, I don't know how to wire an outlet, but you have a good head on your shoulders. And
you're willing to learn.
You're willing to learn, yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it.
In fact, you've told me that you prefer hiring young men that are willing to learn versus
people who come in and say, I have 15, 20 years experience. Yeah. Yeah. So everybody, the AC company, that Iron Shield is somebody who is in a position now that they was not in the position they were at when they walked in the door. And so, and I mean, everybody, from management to the service guys to the installers, office personnel, they've all come in as good people with a good head on their shoulders who are willing to learn and advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of ways, you're providing now the training to people that was provided to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's what makes me thrive to do that is I was once that one young kid who didn't.
And I want to emphasize too, like how good this is, like for the community, for the world. Because on one hand, you're providing a very valuable service.
Mm-hmm.
In Florida, we need air conditioning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many ways, you are serving the community by providing a need that the community has.
Mm-hmm.
And then also but you're also making money off of it, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people you're happy because you get paid.
Yeah.
And then you can provide for your family and give to your church
And your employees.
And it also provides jobs for people in the community. And it sounds like you give a lot of opportunities to young people who lack experience and kind of work their way up like you did. And then, of course, the community gets the air conditioning and the heat that they need.
And we don't all melt.
We all know. Yeah. Or freeze. Yeah.
So how do you, Vic, like, how do you think about your company? Is it, as a Christian man, like, what do you, when you think about going into work every day, what's on your mind?
I guess what's on my mind is making sure that, things are lined out, set up the way they should be. I mean, the first thing I do when I do go in is I make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Talk to your
everybody's
people.
happy to talk to the guys. Is there anything I can help you with?
Yeah.
You know, and
your people feel
it's-
invested in it.
yeah, everybody feels it. But yeah, everybody's. We've got such a good culture that, I mean, it just happened not too long ago where you can get kicked out of the. You pretty much get kicked out of the culture.
Yeah.
At this place.
Yeah.
It
If you
is-
don't stay.
Yeah,
What's up,
or if you're just acting up, or you do something that's could hinder anybody else, you know, it kicks you out of the culture. So we've got a tight. We're a family for sure. We've got a tight family.
That's good. So one of the things that I was thinking about when we were sort of outlining this podcast is, you know, coming from a secular world, and now I'm in ministry, newly in ministry. What I've noticed is that churches honor missionaries. They honor people with musical talents, maybe some tech stuff. But I never have really heard a sermon on honoring the businessmen in the church. And so, you know, you guys have both been in ministry, Austin and Robbie, a lot longer. Have you guys ever heard anything like that? Do you ever hear sermons and a word about, you know, supporting the men and women who are out there in the community?
When I was a young man, my dad was a very successful businessman, 147 employees, large business. And he got pulled in to the Gideons.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was a young boy, I went with my dad to a Gideon conference. I think that's the only place I've ever heard a sermon on God using businessmen, because that's what they are.
Right.
You have to be a businessman in order to be invited in.
Christian group.
It's a Christian group of businessmen.
Okay, interesting.
And I think that's the only place I've ever heard a sermon. And it was to the effect of, God gifted you men to have the gift of giving.
Right. Okay.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to hit this real quick. Vic was telling me after church not that long ago that he pays for this doctor service for his employees for their medical needs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of personality. That's the type of thing that churches really should go, hey, godly businessmen caring about their men physically, spiritually, and doing you don't hear much about that, but you should care for those under your charge. And I think that's where there's sermons about caring for people under your charge, but none of them actually hit the businessman.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
There's this problem where we view in the evangelical world that, you know, business is maybe like disordered desires or something. And in reality, business is not the problem itself. And in fact, no church could operate if people weren't providing, you know, the funds to operate. And that usually that comes from a business, whether it's a employee who is being paid by a business or a business owner who's investing in the church. And so the point is, like, we all just take it for granted that people are out there doing economics and operating in the society and earning money, and we want the money, but we don't ever support those people. I don't feel like well enough. And I don't mean Grace Point or anything like that. I just mean a wider church culture doesn't honor that, I think, the way that we should. And I think it's because of the outlook, the worldview that says, on one hand, nothing matters. You know, we talked about that this morning while I ate breakfast. And on the other hand, like, anything worldly is to be shunned. And so what is really holy is ministry, as if that's the only job.
And I would say, and this is going to sound funny coming from me, I would say ministry in itself is an idolatry to many men who seek it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. In fact,
kind of like politics, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's supposed to be a public good.
It's supposed to be a public good. But like when I was going through my health scare, I remember one of my older pastor friends saying to me, Austin, is preaching something you do only because God's called you to it, or is it an idol in your life? And I started thinking, good things can become idolatrous when they're not loved rightly. So I would say this: I don't think the minister and God's economy, the minister is not honored more than the businessman. In God's economy, you find your calling and you do your calling to the glory of God.
Yeah.
And God honors that.
I think that Austin, you're 100% right. Now, you had a father who was a businessman, and you ended up going into ministry.
Yes.
My dad was in ministry, and I ended up going into ministry.
Mhm.
And I am very thankful that he never tried to like pressure me or anything like that, into kind of following in those same type of footsteps. But I will say that the church that I was attending, they didn't say like that going into ministry was like better or a higher level than like regular work or whatever you want to call it. But I did kind of get that distinct impression because, when we'd have sometimes, because my church did altar calls, and a lot of it was to get saved, but it was also for other things too. And sometimes people would come down, especially when they were like teenagers or young adults, and they'd surrender to full-time Christian service.
Oh, okay.
And what they meant by that was they were saying, I'm going to be a pastor or a missionary, or I'm going to work in the church as my job, where I'm getting my paycheck.
And they were lauded for that.
And they were lauded for that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like they started then shaming people who weren't.
Right.
But they also weren't praising people who were in.
Nobody came down and said, I'm going to start a multi-millionaire conglomerate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like, it was like, if you work in, and we've talked about how there's no such thing as really, truly secular, but for the sake of being able to explain it, for people that are involved in secular work, it's like, well, how do those people honor God? Because you're honoring God, if you're a pastor, you're honoring God, 40 hours plus a week, right?
Yeah.
But how do you honor God if you're working for an AC company or a chef at a restaurant or whatever? And it's like, well, how do I honor God doing that? Well, I guess I can share the gospel with my coworkers or something. And you can definitely do that. But I think that what we're missing is that we can bring honor and glory to God simply by our work that we're called to.
Yeah. John Calvin has a quote. He says, no task will be so sordid and base, provided you obey your calling in it, that it will not shine and be reckoned very precious in God's sight. The concept is there's dignity in ordinary labor that glorifies God.
Yeah.
And there's no labor that is more precious than any other labor.
Yeah. Martin Luther says he said, God does not need your good works, but your neighbor does. The Christian shoemaker does his duty not by putting little crosses on shoes, but by making good shoes. Yeah. And so a businessman can honor God by doing his work to the glory of God.
Yeah.
Now, here's something I said businessman, and it just made me think that I need to clarify. Not only men can be in business, right? So like we think about Proverbs 31, she was out there in the field. In fact, I think I've got it right here. Yeah, I do. Verses 16 through 18. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. And so I think an interesting thing is, your family is very entrepreneurial and that includes your mom.
Yes.
Right?
My mom. Yeah. My mom. So we were raised and being raised in an entrepreneurial family, and you might do this a little bit with your kids, Vic, and it's a mindset that comes up in certain families. My dad was a godly man. He served as a deacon at Grace Point before he passed away. Faithful, was always a big giver as far as like what he can do, what he can bring. Very loved by the men in the church. But my dad, he had a saying he made us boys. He'd tell us all the time, sons, you can be garbage men. Nothing wrong with being garbage men, but you better own the truck. Okay. And it's funny because I bought that mentality when I was young, but as an adult from a biblical perspective, I realized not everybody's gifted to own a truck.
Yeah. Right.
Not everybody can own a truck, obey the tax laws, obey the laws. Yeah. Not everybody has. And there's nothing wrong with a man who works hard, who's not gifted to own the truck. At the same time, God does need gifted trashmen who own the truck.
Yeah.
And it takes both to make the world go round. It takes both in God's economy. And what was your question originally?
I was saying
my mom.
As well. Yeah.
So that attitude, my brothers all went entrepreneur. Well, they all went different routes, then came back entrepreneurial when they realized there was more money to be made working for yourself. Sure. And so my mom has, since my dad's passed, and there's no longer a family business Dad's really running, has been turning around, partnering with my brothers and security companies, now a tower company, property investments. But that right there is biblical family economics.
Yeah.
My parents made money instead of just you guys make your own way.
Right.
We're enjoying life. And there's nothing wrong with them enjoying the fruit of their labor in retirement. Mom's attitude is, I want to make sure my grandkids have something to inherit.
That's right.
And so she's taken the money that my father and mom made together and I've turned around and invested it into my brother's businesses and has been partnership in them.
Yeah.
So,
and I know for, my little business, I would call a micro, tiny little thing, but like I've even started getting like my girls to like package the books when I'm selling, and I send them out, just like being involved, and I'll pay, 50 cents for every book you put in, and trying to teach them that work is good.
Well, family
Teaching them
economics.
child labor is good. Yeah,
Yes. Well, when I was a kid,
Do not just get myself in trouble. By
by the time I was 12, by the time I was 12, I knew how to spray, spray paint.
Yep.
I knew how to run a scrubber.
Yep.
I was running a scrubber 20, 30 hours a week during the summer when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
By the time I was 17, I was working 48 hours straight sometimes. And I'll never forget, and this is where family economics is so good, because we would, like, for instance, we did a hospital here in Tampa. We're not in Tampa anymore, up in Tampa. And I worked on that job for 3 weeks straight. And I remember at one point I was like, I noticed everybody's getting paid and I hadn't got a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I remember I said to Dad, I go, I didn't get a paycheck. He goes, son, this business is your business. You're a part of the family. The family gets paid when we get done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the guys are going to get paid now.
Right. Yeah. And I never did without.
Yeah.
But it taught me that business puts their employees first, pays the paychecks, waits for those quarterly payouts on big jobs, and then we cash it.
Yeah. People don't think about the amount of, Vic, you can speak to this, but like they don't think about the amount of outlay that you're doing initially, hoping to see a return on that investment.
Yeah. Just because
no guarantee.
Yeah, just because you sent the invoice doesn't mean you're going to get paid.
Right.
But the labor still paid,
and you got to pay them whether that invoice is getting paid or not. Right?
Yeah, and I think what back to what Austin was saying is, for me, every one of my employees, and I even hate calling them employees, right?
Yeah,
because
they're like family to you.
They're all like my business partners in a sense. Yeah, where everybody's accountable, and that's the best way to look at it from my standpoint. So,
I also, before we we're using a lot of things about like investment and such, and I want to kind of point people to a thought here, and that's that there was a guy, he was German, a guy named Max Weber, I believe is how you pronounce it. Weber. Okay. Yeah. And he wrote a book in the early 1900s called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism.
Yeah,
I've heard that quoted.
And he basically says that if you look at, like, he was looking around 1900, and he says which countries are the most capitalist and most profitable and most wealthy. And he said the United States, Britain, and his home country of Germany. And he said, if you look, what countries were most affected by Protestant Christianity?
Yeah.
The United States, Britain, and Germany. And he said, and he looked at it, and he said that Protestantism and Calvinism in particular had a view of work that led people to work really hard because they believed that working hard was something that glorified God.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Colossians 3:23 and 24 says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men.
Absolutely.
Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ.
Yeah.
And so he says that Calvin taught that it's not just people who are working in the church that are working for God, but everybody's working for God. And the reason he taught that is because that is what the scriptures say. And that because of that, Christians that were following his ideology and follow in their churches, hearing that work is to the glory of God, they worked hard, they worked the best, but they also worked in an ethical way. Because a lot of times when people think of capitalism in business, they think of people not taking care of their employees, doing the least good work possible that they can get paid for. So what happened was in these particular countries, they on the one hand believed in really hard focused work, as opposed to some societies that downplayed labor as being not
or
spiritual,
taking advantage of people. Yeah.
And then on the other side, they worked in very ethical ways, and so they weren't cheating their people. They were taking care of their employees, like I said, and then they were also taking that money and investing it in either back in the business or giving to their church or giving to the poor. And so that's what made those places strong, was because they had that balance of a real big focus on work, but also a focus on ethics, while many nations did not have both. And there's either no ethics or there wasn't a lot of art.
You have to have both. So like, we all hear like Milton Friedman for the most part, but Milton Friedman would say that the market existed for individual freedom and efficiency. And he was not a Christian. He was a Jew, where Kuyper, Russ Nooney, all the other Christians would say that the market exists under God's moral law and it exists for obedience and stewardship and service to man. And they actually wrote on that.
That sounds like a Christian nationalism.
It is a Christian nationalism. When you're talking about Kuyper, it's always Christian nationalism.
Was Friedman a religious Jew or a secular?
He was a secular Jew. He was a secular Jew. But you can see, even being a secular Jew,
when did you start hating Jews?
Yeah. No. I was actually asking that because, if you really took the Old Testament seriously, it has a lot to say about hard work and how you treating your employees.
Well, you can tell, though, Friedman was affected by his training with the whole trickle-down concepts and stuff that he brought into modern economy. But I don't know why you like to leave that hatred of the Jews just flopping out there for everybody.
Sure. Now, so you brought up something, though, Robbie, about the culture of taking advantage of people or, taking the cheap route. I mean, Vic, you ever seen that? Have you ever seen companies who are always looking to find the cheapest way to do it, and then they end up those customers end up calling you because they felt taken advantage of or things like that?
Yeah. So we see that all the time, and and it's one of those things where you gotta have the right approach on that, and it's you won't really know how to approach it unless you've been through it, right? So they may do the scam where they know that we should be charging X amount of dollars for something, but we're going to charge you triple the price because your home is big and nice or something like that. Or they may be the cheapest, try to be the cheapest route, and then we have to go and charge the customer to fix what they didn't do or what they didn't.
And that costs loyalty, doesn't it? Because those people no longer value that company. In fact, they're going to probably tear it down.
Yeah, and those companies usually don't last. I mean, they'll be around for, we call them turn and burn. They turn and burn. They either sell out or file bankruptcy.
Well, let me ask you this, Vic. You in your particular line of business have to constantly walk that balancing rope between charging enough to do the job right. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people, it's like they're asking for these great deals, but they're not going to get the job done right, and they're not going to get the equipment they need. Yeah. Versus selling more equipment than a person needs. Yeah. So there's that constant balancing rope. Is that something that you particularly see, and that's always a rebalancing? And how does that play out with your employees?
Yeah, so that's not something that pops up too often anymore. It's something that once you go through it once or twice, I mean, you definitely learn from it. I mean, for instance, we've had where we had to change the whole unit out because it was a half a ton undersized, right? It would keep up in the summertime or whatever. So, and this was early on. This is years ago when I managed the company. So it hadn't happened with us yet, and definitely doesn't. Yeah. But just systems and processes is how we go about it. When we go to somebody's house, we are measuring the windows, the attic insulation, which way the house faces. I mean, we hit every angle to make sure that we don't run into that problem.
Yeah, that's good. So here's what I want to talk about, as we start to try to land the plane here. How do we create a culture of buying from other Christians? And here's what I foresee people saying. So I'm going to, at the outset, try to address it. What I hate is when somebody sees a Christian business owner and they go, "Oh, I got this issue. I'm going to see if they'll cut me a deal. If I get a great deal and undercut everything, And so they end up treating their brother in Christ
Yes.
terribly.
That bothers me.
Yeah. And so what I would want in a Christian borough, in a Christian community, is to say, I want you to charge me exactly what you're going to charge everybody else.
Yeah.
But I want to hire you because we have the same belief systems. We have the same worldview. We have the same goals.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to charge me anything less. Don't rip me off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But charge me exactly what the job costs.
Yeah.
And do a great job. And then I'm going to hire you next time I need you as well. You know,
Yeah,
I don't wanna undercut.
And I want to hire Vic because I know how he treats his employees.
Yeah.
And I know that investing in his business is investing in future Christian family.
That's right. That's right.
But he also does good work.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's huge. That's
Yeah,
huge. Go ahead.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I lived for a year in Greenville, South Carolina, which has Bob Jones University, which is a very famous Christian fundamentalist.
It's an independent fundamentalist.
Yeah.
I think they've kind of left fundamentalism, but they were the fundamentalist
But my
college.
point in bringing that up is it's a very religious community. Yeah. And so every business card you get has the Jesus fish on it.
Right.
So,
And that almost tells you something.
so there's a lot of people there trying to say, oh, you should buy from me or you can trust me because I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
But that's maybe the way people market it, but it's not always a reality.
Yeah.
I gotta. My dad, if when he's seen a fish on a card, he almost didn't want to hire
That's right.
him.
That's right.
Yeah.
And by the way, here's my dad, a very successful businessman, also treated his men very well. He had men that worked for him for over 20 something years, and he'd start retirement programs, insurance programs for them. And when my dad passed, hundreds of people showed up for his funeral, and some of his old employees showed up. He was loved, but he would always kind of Luther's attitude. A good shoemaker don't do his Christian service by sewing little crosses on the shoes, but making the best shoe at a honest price and an honest where you're blessed in the community, but you're also being successful.
Well, you're blessing by making great shoes, and you're building back into the economy. So,
So
have you ever seen this?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in there and say, it's also from my view on this is it goes back to what you were saying earlier. BD. You could be hiring somebody could look at it and say, okay, that's a Christian business, right? So let me hire them, and I'll find something. I'll nitpick something because I know deep down they're gonna do what's right. So if I angle like that, and it happens. It does happen more than I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'd rather just do the right thing from the jump, and whether it be give you your money back or do to add some. And I'm not, I guess what I'm trying to say, some people take advantage of that.
Sure.
So if you advertise with the fish on the card, or whatever the case is,
they're looking for that.
You've got people looking for that opportunity.
Yeah. And I hate to see that in the church specifically. Like, so as we seek to build, something here, what I want to say is, like, if you're a business owner, we want you to do great work, but we want you to also make a profit, to take care of your people, to take care of your family, to invest back into the community, into the church. Okay. I want to talk about one more thing. I also want you to kind of kick us off. Is it important to restore the household economy, and why?
I'm a big fan of it.
In what way?
Pause. Define household economy. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, please.
Household economy would be the concept of building out a future of inheritance, not just spiritually, but also physically for your family. Would you put it in any other way?
So when we think household economy, a lot of times it's easy to go back and think, agrarian society. Where
and that's why I'm having a hard time defining it.
Well, I think it looks different now.
It does.
And so I think that's one of the things that you have to acknowledge. But, I've seen people just create, businesses out of their house where they're doing Etsy shop, right? They're building something, they're making something, and they sell it on Etsy. And, they actually create a business and make good money doing that. And I guess what I'm saying is, when I think household economy, I'm thinking, okay, how can I bring some sort of income in for my family within working from my home so I don't have to go out and do so much work outside of home?
And I would also argue that household economy can also play into the spirit of the household working together for a common goal. Like if you look at the family of the Levitical priesthood, the entire family worked in the temple, and the temple was their inheritance, but they didn't really build generational wealth. So there is a sense of household economy that's about building spiritual legacy. But I don't want to just stop there. Like, for instance, in my household, my uncle gave me advice early in my ministry. He's been a minister 40 something years now. And he gave me advice early on. He said, listen, Austin, you can either go work in the ministry and be gone from your kids, or you can bring your kids and let them work in the ministry with you.
Yep. And here's where I think, in today's society where we don't have as much working at home, it could even look like when something breaks in your house, you fix it as a family. Like you figure out a way, you learn how to fix it, or let's say like right now we're wanting to have a table behind the couch, and I could go look for that online and find one, that's pre-built, got all that, or I could build it and, let the girls, take part in it. I'm going to show you how to measure. I'm going to show you how to do this, so it could just be that you're saving money, by doing it internally as opposed to making money.
Well, I would also say part of family economics would be teaching your kids actually how money works. Because 1950s on through, there almost became this, we don't talk about finances. And most kids, because I'm an 80s child, our parents were 60s children. You don't ask what mom and dad make. You don't ask, and the more helpful thing is, this is how much I work. This is how much I make. This is how much it costs to live.
And this is why I do it.
And this is what we're giving to the Lord up front because it's important to me. And this is, and so but getting back on the track of today, we do need the physical part of family economics to be revived because globalism brought about mega corporations that are very anti-God. And we need Christian organizations, Christian businesses taking hold again.
Yeah. I think we need to do an episode maybe on that to flesh it out some, because we're not going to be able to do a good job right now, but we need to touch on the Industrial Revolution and how that played into all that.
Oh, it messed up church and everything.
So go ahead, Robbie.
Well, I was just going to ask, do you think that these big giant, like global corporations, do you think those are just inherently anti-God by structure, or you're just looking at the way our society is currently?
The way our society is built, those structures are easily swayed into secularism. It's like the Sam Walton family, Walmart. The first generation, strong Christians, did great things for the church. By the time his grandkids got a hold, it was corporate ran, greed, liberalism. And now they're one of the biggest supporters of the homosexual movement in the United States. But on the other hand, you have the Chick-fil-A family, who for the most part has stayed on track. So, I don't think big corporation necessarily equates. Hobby Lobby is another one, a Christian organization that grew to a multi-million-dollar business that has stayed Christian. So I think it can be done. I don't think being large makes you inherently bad. No.
Yeah, in the same way, pretty much all large businesses now are that way.
Yeah.
So I think I might answer your question a little bit differently. I might say that inherently in the way that businesses have to operate in the environment, that based on the laws, like you talked about, you can't ask somebody if they're a Christian to hire them. I think you should be able to do that.
You should.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so inherently, the bigger the business is, the more regulations there are.
I believe that D.L. Moody, the famous preacher in Chicago in the 1800s, if I remember correctly, the reason he was not interested in spiritual things at all, he moved to Chicago because that was a growing city at the time. And he got a job as a salesman, but the owner of the company was, I might have been shoes. I can't remember what it was though. And the owner of the company was a Christian and said, well, I'm going to hire employees to go to church. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to work for me, you go to church. And so D.L. Moody starts going to church simply so he can keep that job.
Yep.
And that's how he becomes a believer.
Under Christian nationalism, we'll be able to ask that again.
Well, we're not going to go down that road.
Oh, okay.
But the whole reason why the laws concerning not asking was it was pushed by a Jewish conglomerate group. That's another history for another time. but they're the ones that push for that law where you can ask.
Separate.
That law in a secular society like ours honestly could protect Christians as well as hurt them, though, because if you're going to a job of people who do not like Christianity, if they can ask you, they can also deny you.
But-
So, I mean, it does work.
Yes, but with that law,
when
so before that law came into existence, you had the Sam Waldrons, you had, they blocked the next generation from asking those questions, and the secularists took over.
Sam Walton.
Okay. I said I'm Waldron. So yes and no. I agree that at this point in our secular society, it's probably protecting Christians. But on the other end, our society wouldn't have become so secularized had that law not been passed to begin. So we got to be careful. There's so much there to unpack, and I don't want people to read into what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, as a final charge, what I'll say is, strongholds are not built by sermons alone. They're built by shops and skills and trades and farms and households and, of course, businesses that are ordered toward kingdom ends. And so if you want a church that can endure hostility, you got to raise children without compromise. You got to fund the mission without having to beg for money, right? And you must take the borough economy seriously. And so, you got to believe together, you got to worship together, you got to build, trade, and provide together. So, Vic, just wanted to say, we appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking about your business. If you're in the Ocala area, reach out to Iron Shield. Yeah, heating there. I also want to say Iron and Shield.
We'll have to record that later.
Yeah. You've been listening to the Altars and Ashes podcast. Stand firm, build faithfully, and let your household blaze as an altar to the King.